is Lisa Hann. I'm the Executive Director of Family Services Incorporated, and we want to welcome you to our panel discussion this evening. Every April, we recognize Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and this year, Victim Services, like so many other groups, have had to go virtual with our event. You may have seen one of our wellness webinars and attended our lunch and learns or seen a post on Facebook or Instagram. And unfortunately, because of COVID, we can't have a live in-person event, but we are doing the best we can with our panel discussion this evening. This evening will consist of several discussion topics for all the panelists to participate in, and then once the discussion is over, we'll move to the question and answer period. We hope this event can educate and spread awareness to the community regarding sexual assault and how we respond to it. So I'd like to introduce our panelists. To my immediate left is Ashley Owens. Ashley is our Program Director for Family Services at our Center for Child Justice. Cheryl Gonsman, Victim Services Director, Supervisor. Jess Walk is the Interim Police Chief for Tyrone Borough Police, and Thad Graham, Victim Services Education Specialist. So folks, we're going to ask you some questions. Some of them will be targeted to specific individuals, but anyone can jump in. So our first round here, this one's for everyone, so whoever wants to go first. Please explain your role in the larger community response to sexual assault.
We can just start with me since I'm here to start and run down the line.
That works.
So I'm the director of the Center for Child Justice, which is Blair County's Children's Advocacy Center. So in the realm of sexual assault, our center is the place where children who have been sexually assaulted come and receive services. They receive a forensic interview, which is just a specialized interview so that they don't have to go talk to Jess Walk over there, any police officers or medical staff. They come and speak with us, tell their story one time, and then we also offer the forensic medical examinations for children, and we connect the children and their caregivers with any mental health services or any follow-up services that they may require.
So I'm Cheryl, and I'm the Victim Service Direct Service Supervisor with Family Services, and we have the Advocate Program, and we come into play several possible different variants. Some people can come to us as self-referred. They might have heard of us from a presentation that Thad may have done, or just somebody out in the community calling to ask questions. And those questions we've received can be, I think I was sexually assaulted, I think I was raped, and we sort of help guide them where to go in that direction. Other ways we come in contact with survivors is through the police department or the hospital, and we're called to be in contact with the survivor. And while we're with the survivor, we do a lot of options counseling. We do a lot of safety. We try to keep them as safe as we possibly can. We are oftentimes the mediator for the police departments. In some departments, it goes from a street cop to a detective, and we're with them through that. We're with them if they go to a hearing, preliminary hearing, through a trial. We usually start at the very beginning of their experience, and we're with them beyond. So we do a lot with the victims, just try to help make them feel safe.
Thanks, Cheryl. Well, I'm Jess Walk. I'm the Interim Police Chief for Tyrone Borough right now. Basically, we just take the initial investigation, and depending on the age of the victim, we reach out to Family Services or the Child Advocacy Center, and we go from there.
Awesome. So my name is Thad Graham. I'm the Education Specialist. My role is a little bit different. My role is hopefully prevention, working within schools, working within other organizations, churches, youth groups, as well as doing other events to hopefully bring awareness to sexual assault, maybe work within schools to prevent it from happening in the first place, as well as helping victims who aren't ready to come forward realize that it's okay to ask for help, and to disclose, to hopefully get services, and to reach out to the police or victim services or whoever can help them.
let's build on that a little bit. How do we create a community response that encourages people to come forward to report sexual assault?
So one of the biggest things that I think we can do is educating our children and adults as well on what really is consent. So for example, allowing them to really understand, what consent looks like, what a healthy relationship looks like versus an unhealthy relationship, what, a healthy relationship looks like, because unfortunately, a lot of children are growing up with not the best role models. They may not have, a great home life. They may not know what a healthy relationship looks like. So talking with them, giving them some ideas of what it looks like may help them better understand it. When looking at consent, letting them know legally what consent is in Pennsylvania, as well as understanding the concept that consent is enthusiastic, it's willful, it's a positive thing. It's something that you are going to have full knowledge of going in. It's something that can be withdrawn at any time. It's not going to be coerced. It's not going to be forced. It's not going to be harmful in any way, shape, or form. And it also has to be of willing mind. If you're under the influence of drugs or alcohol, you cannot legally give consent for sex or anything. And if you are victimized when you're under drugs or alcohol, understand that you're the victim. Even if you're underage, for example, drinking underage, and you were sexually assaulted, you don't need to worry about getting in trouble. You're the victim. We need to get you help. We need to get you the support you need. That's my thoughts, at least.
I would agree with that. We wouldn't want to victimize the victim. So even if they had been drinking or under the influence of drugs, that would be, basically put aside or put on the back burner if they're a victim of a sex crime.
Yeah, and I think, from the child perspective, right, we know that currently, a lot of us sitting at this table, when we were younger, there wasn't the access that children have now to the internet and to pornography in particular. So we're talking about like the average age that a child first views pornography is like 8 or 9 years old, right? So like that, the work Thad's doing really goes with this, that either you're going to talk to your child about healthy relationships and sex and proper body part names in a way that is healthy and understanding, or they're going to log on to their smartphone or your smartphone and they're going to pull up porn. And that's how our children are learning about sex. So that just gives a lot of skewed information, maybe not the healthiest relationships. And, if you are a parent and you're not sure how to start those conversations, there are so many resources out there now on social media, books, podcasts, things that you can really tap into to give you some examples of proper ways to explain sex. And then that just kind of going off of yours with the consent thing, it's funny because we talk about consent and it's always like, right, it has to be enthusiastic and yay. And it's like, I just picture like, hello, I'm Ashley and we're going on a date. And I'm thinking that perhaps we could have sexual intercourse later. Is that a yes or a no? Can you check the box or sign your name to this line? And I think it becomes important to not model that necessarily, but whenever you start like having good conversation in your family, respecting each other's boundaries, simple boundaries, right? We're talking just really basic things and modeling that body autonomy, then it becomes an easier conversation, I think, and maybe not as awkward because we're practicing it in very concrete ways within our family system or school districts or anything like that. So I don't know, Thad, if you I don't want to put you on the spot, or this is awkward conversation for a panel, but when you are explaining consent, right, what does that look like? Or is there a resource out there that is a good example for people to see like consent in action without steering us to pornography, Thad.
So,
but just what's that really look like?
So we have a couple different options. We actually, myself, can offer healthy sexuality classes and programming for parents, so that you can better talk to your child and fully, understand how to talk to them about healthy sexuality, how to talk to them about consent, about sexuality, about what healthy sexuality looks like, about using proper names for body parts. And when we talk about consent, there is no, specific word for consent. Yes, we want to hear yes, we want to hear no, but we know that consent is more than just that. It's body language, it's understanding body language, it's understanding, compassion for another person, understanding their emotions. that really goes into that as well. We actually have healthy relationship programming that we can work with, kids from preschool all the way up to high school, where we look at consent, and we look at it in many different ways. We start talking about it with things like a video game, or something like borrowing money or borrowing a car, and looking at it with different lens to give them the concept without talking about sexuality, and then moving into sexuality and working through situations that they may go through, and open up the conversation to allow them to ask questions. Is there a situation that you're not sure about? Let's talk about it.
I think, for me, I think it's really important when you're building a community. Two things I think are really important. I think we take the approach, we start by believing. We don't start with asking questions about or trying to dispel what the person is telling us. We just automatically start by believing. And I think the other thing that's really important is what you're seeing tonight, this panel of us, being willing to come together to a table for the best interest of their survivors. And I think what's truly fascinating for me is I've been here 20 years, and I distinctly remember meeting each one of you in the same capacity, Jess, though, but Ashley and Thad, they were in completely different fields, and we worked together as the prosecuting attorney at times, but just it started with conversation. I think conversation is the key. Being afraid to talk about these things builds that barrier. And I think we've come to a point in our society where you just have to start talking about these things. I find it fascinating. You're talking about body parts. So I became a grandma, and I have a grandson, and we were changing the diaper, and somebody said, "Oh, we're going to clean your pee-pee." And I'm like, "No, it's not a pee-pee. It's a penis." And at first, feeling sort of awkward about saying that word out loud, no, it's a penis. And so we teach him it's his penis, and we don't, we teach him it's so important, because we do see things where we're taught to be embarrassed of our body parts and not name them. So can you imagine being a 4-year-old child that's embarrassed by their body parts and being asked to talk about their body parts? So I think as a society, we're really coming into a movement where conversation is so important, and believing is the utmost importance.
That's a good segue into the next question. What obstacles do you feel sexual assault victims face the most when they're disclosing? We know that there's physical and emotional trauma on top of dealing with hospitals and court systems and all the chaos that goes on. So is there a pattern you've seen regarding what victims have the hardest time dealing with?
I would say probably the court system, the whole process itself. Not so much the investigation, maybe the waiting for DNA results if you're waiting, and it sometimes takes 6 months to a year to get them back. But I would say the court system, and them having to face the perpetrator in court.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's also interesting, one of the first questions the victim gets asked of a sexual assault is, "What were you wearing?"
Yep.
That kills me. That's the only crime I know that exists, that victim is asked to talk about what they were wearing. How many drinks did you have? Are you sure you didn't do this? Or why were you there? What were you thinking? It's the only crime I know where the impact of the crime is put onto the survivor, and the survivor has to defend what they did and what they didn't do.
Yeah, I think, I'm here from the kids' lens, and I think that when we're talking about children, some of the biggest obstacles they face is that a lot of times the perpetrator in a child sexual abuse case, there's been manipulation and grooming behavior. And so a lot of times, 93% of the cases we see, the child knows the perpetrator. And so they love that perpetrator, even though all of these things have happened to them. And so for a child to try to reconcile that and, speak out is tough. And then a lot of times the perpetrator may throw threats out there. And one of the most common threats we hear is that children and youth is going to show up and you're going to get in trouble and your parents are going to get in trouble. And of course, we know that for children, we report it to Childline, and law enforcement and children and youth get involved. And so when children and youth knocks on their door, that child is thinking, oh my gosh, it's coming true. What this person told me is coming true. So that's, a barrier. And then the other part is the reaction of the adult they choose to disclose to. So, when you're the adult hearing it, we all have that guttural whenever we hear a terrible story from a child, that child may mistake your reaction for you being upset with them or them being in trouble. And so that is a barrier a lot of times. And then what we try to change at the CAC is a child without a CAC and without a forensic interview usually tell their story about 9 times. And so for a child to have to keep repeating and repeating and repeating their story, first off, re-traumatizes them. Second off, at some point they're like, why is no one believing me? I keep having to repeat my story. And so at the CAC, we try to narrow that to one interview, which hopefully helps take, that barrier away or that obstacle away for that child.
Actually, I was reading one source that stated that a child that's disclosing sexual assault has to tell up to 7 adults before something is done. And that just, to me, is an unbelievable barrier that a child would have to go through disclosing to 7 different people before something is actually done and they're actually believed. Right. And that's insane. I feel like that's a very large barrier to, a child coming forward, and same for an adult. It's a very embarrassing time for them. They're victimized, and they're afraid to be believed.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, as adults, anything that happens, right? Like my kid falls and scratches her leg and I'm like, what happened? What? You want to know. You want to know where it came from, what happened. And it's not coming from a place necessarily, right, of not believing or questioning them, but you just want to know all the information and just what that can do, right? Instead of just maybe taking the deep breath. And, as an investigator, as an advocate, I think we all know that okay, pause. Take the pause, collect your thoughts, take a deep breath before you jump in, because we do all want to know. But we have to be mindful of how that's affecting whoever we're talking to who has been victimized in some way.
Yeah.
We have an online viewer who wants to know, do you talk to people that just because they're in a relationship with a person does not mean they have to have sex? That no matter how long they've been together, they still have the right to consent?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So that's actually, one of the things we talk about is, it doesn't matter what the relationship is. Even if they're married and been married for, 30 years, consent is consent. You have to ask for each, and not ask per se, but consent has to be given for, each activity, and it can be withdrawn at any time. The length of the relationship doesn't matter.
No means no.
Yeah, no means no. And silence,
it
doesn't equal yes.
Yeah. Yeah, you can say yes one time and say no the next.
Yeah.
And you can say yes at the beginning and say no in the middle.
Yep.
And that means stop.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really important. The moment somebody says no or I'm not sure, convincing them to have sex with you is rape. You cannot coerce somebody into having sex with you.
We have another audience member who states that they became a self-advocate 2 years ago because of this topic. Has there been any tougher law changes regarding housing authority letting people in that have had PFAs?
That's a great question.
That is a great question.
But
that is
to
out of
my
my
knowledge,
field.
there is not.
Yes, I don't.
There's nothing
that I know.
maybe in your subsidized housings, they're recognizing protection orders. You just need to take that order to the office, I believe, and then.
And usually they'll do a no trespassing order in our subsidized housing. If there's a PFA, and the person keeps violating or doing whatever, they'll send a no trespassing letter, but not really any law changes regarding that.
Are there laws to help trans and non-binary individuals that get sexually assaulted when even having certain anatomy is already difficult for them?
So I don't think there are laws necessarily that speak to this particular issue, but I know that the sexual assault laws don't necessarily, if I had a statute book in front of me, we'd read it together, have a little lesson. But, the way that the law reads, there's not really like male or female. There's like, different sexual assault laws.
Penetration, how
And,
slight.
yeah, penetration, however slight with whatever. I mean, there's definitely not, it's not limited to by gender or anything like that. So. Oh, there's someone knows the answer in the room, but it's not us.
I understand that there are protections in the new VAWA that is still needing to be passed, so we'll hear more after VAWA is passed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Then
And
it would be a
law.
law.
Okay.
Yeah. So they're working on that. But we've had trans and non-binary children come through the CAC, and the process, the law is what we're looking at as far as sexual assaults. There are laws that fit it. So it's not like that's a barrier for charges to be filed or someone to be held accountable under the law.
Yeah.
Right.
They're not excluded.
It doesn't really make a difference.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
does it?
Right.
How do you think social media, TV, and movies depict intimate relationships and consent?
I'm laughing. I'm so sorry. It's the romance movie, right? They're still depicting sexual assaults as romantic at times. It's amazing how that hasn't really changed over the years.
And it's not even just that, but it's also things like stalking that they make seem okay and normal, especially for younger viewers, young adults, when we know that something like stalking, especially by an intimate partner or someone that has been a previous intimate partner, increases your risk of murder by that person by 3 times. Stalking is not okay, and it's not something that we need to take lightly. And a lot of media portrays stalking as an okay thing. It's something that's just kind of cool in today's age.
Which I think a lot of assaults start with stalking.
Amen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of leads up to the assault.
And I think the social media is so far ahead of the laws right now. I think we're still running to catch up with laws to meet the social media trends and the online trends.
I will say it's called Normal People, and I think it's based off of a book series. I'm not even that familiar with all of it, but I watched it over, COVID. We were all home. But I was watching it. It's like a young adult, like romance drama type thing. And the way they portrayed their first sexual encounter where they decide together to have sex, and the consent, like I was watching it going, oh my gosh, right? It wasn't the awkward, like, is it okay? But
It's a yes or a no.
The young man was like checking in with her, just, hey, are you sure at any time if you need to take a break, like you just let me know, like, and they even like used a condom, like it was like safe sex, and I was like, oh my, like rewind, let's watch this again, because it was like they're doing this pretty good,
Right,
like,
yeah.
and it was surprising compared to the other things that you watch and see, and so. Yeah, I like to note that if you do want to watch like a pretty good portrayal of consent in a young adult, they were like seniors in high school, right? So they were younger. It is very graphic, not child friendly. There's nudity, but just to see what I think consent can be done well in movies and shows.
Understanding body language, if someone's pulling back,
Yeah.
and checking in, it's so important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How can we expect a child to understand that no one has the right to touch you without your consent when we tell them they have to give someone a hug or sit on someone's lap?
We don't.
Don't do that. Actually, do you want this one?
Well, I was just
Go
going
for
to say, like we break down the question. How can we expect a child to understand no one has the right to touch you without your consent when we tell them, right? So the messaging's wrong. It's off, right? You're saying one thing. It's funny because I had a friend, and I tend to lecture about these things to people that are around me because it's so important. And he was explaining to me, like, yeah, we tell our kids, like, don't talk to strangers and be careful and that. And he's like, so we, like, tell our kids all this, and then we go on vacation, we hop in the elevator, and there's people in there, and we're like, hey, how you doing? And it's like, there we are, talking to strangers. So we really don't realize how much mixed messaging we can give our kids. So it really is important to you yourself become more aware And to really, so it's not just, right, they have to give someone a hug, or so it's you too.
Mm-hmm.
So just because you're a mom does not mean you get to walk up and hug and kiss on your kid all the time if you want to choose to teach your child these boundaries. It has to be everybody. It has to be their siblings, you as mom and dad. It just has to be across the board consistency. And it helps too to explain to your family or to whoever may be on the other end expecting the hug or expecting to have the child sit on their lap, to explain to them, like, hey, we're not doing that. The child, like, so-and-so will decide. It might take them a little while to warm up, but it's their decision whether they want to do that. That's our role in our family. And, you know, that's where boundaries come in and having a larger conversation, because you can tell a child, like, don't hug someone you don't know, or it's your decision. But then, right, we all feel that pressure when grandma's like, I haven't seen you in 6 months, come here. And you're just like, just give your grandma a hug. But you really have to, you know, practice what you preach and stay back. So we can't expect a child to understand it if they're forced to give people hugs or sit on other people's lap.
No.
And, you know, just going along with, I hate to say it, but I have to say it. Like I said, 93% of abusers are known to the child.
Mm-hmm.
Those are your
Yeah.
family members. Those are friends of your family. Those are coaches, teachers, pastors, priests, whoever is around
Grandmas,
your child.
grandpas.
So you really, as an adult and as the caregiver and protector of the situation, you have to ask yourself, if this person keeps pushing and pushing and pushing to violate the child's boundaries, okay, what else might be going on?
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to start, like, checking your gut and checking and paying attention to those interactions.
Yeah. And just to throw this out here, it's not just with children, you know, with adult sexual assault as well. A majority of the time, 70 to 75% of the time, it's someone you know. It's someone that you know. It's a friend. It's an adult. It's someone that you know. It's very rarely going to be a stranger.
Stranger in the bushes.
Yeah.
Jump out.
It's not the stranger in the bushes jumping out. It's the person you know, a friend, a family member.
Or that person who just won't leave you alone and keeps texting you
Yes.
and liking your social media and showing up places where you are and, oh, come on, it's just one date. It's just one, right? It's that
I just said
pressure.
it starts with stalking.
Yeah,
So, I mean, people put themselves in your life for ulterior motives.
they do.
They do.
They can.
Yeah.
We can't.
This question's for Thad. Are there healthy relationship classes for adults with IDD or autism?
So we are actually working on that currently with the Southern Allegheny Services Management Group, and that's something that we are working towards and trying to offer here in the near future. We're getting there. Very shortly, yes, there will be options like this for residents in Blair County.
Can someone explain how you go about convicting a perpetrator for sexual assault when the victim and perpetrator were already in a relationship?
Is that like
I
the
mean-
$1,000,000 question?
How do you
If somebody has the answer to that, I would really like to know, because that doesn't really happen. The conviction rates are so low. Like, that's a tough one to, that's,
So how often, the question is, how often is this the case, and what can you do to be a support for this victim when she feels it's useless to even try, when it seems no one believes her anyway?
So just like, and I'm just going to throw this out here before Cheryl answers. You know, we know,
Please answer.
we know a majority of the time it's going to be someone they know, and we know that, you know, intimate partner rape can happen. You know, a husband can rape their wife. You know, it's something that we don't talk about. It's something that, you know, some people believe doesn't happen, but it happens a lot more than we want to admit. And like Cheryl said, it's a lot harder to prove and to convict than that stranger in the bushes.
I mean, think about, without naming names, one of the biggest cases where the young lady was passed out, 2 bikers riding by saw it, and it was very difficult to get any leverage on that case.
I mean, in a lot of, you know, particularly for children, there's a lot of cases that don't go forward. And, you know, for one reason or another, it's hard. But cases like this or cases like we see, I like to step back. And I mean, it's not great, but a way to think of it is okay, what is justice in this case, right? And I think a lot of the work that we do deals with, right, we can convict the perpetrator and they can sit in jail for the rest of their life, but there's a bigger picture. and there's a survivor who we can support. And there are other ways that we can work within our community to provide some of that support to move forward. And so it's just so many cases are really hard to swallow. You don't get the results that you want. You don't get the system. It's a system. The legal system is a system. It's a court system.
Yep.
And just the way our system is set up gives the benefit of the doubt a lot, right, Jess, to the defendant. Not, and that's a conversation that has to happen. It's really hard on any victim to go through the system. So, kind of changing the focus that, it's important to get that conviction and it's important for that justice, but it's also important to find other ways to find success for situations.
And sometimes the victims will settle for, not the rape charge. They'll, a simple assault charge because they don't want to go through the process. They don't want to they don't want to be on the stand and have to testify in front of the perpetrator that's sitting in front of them.
Yeah.
So a lot of times they'll just, agree to a plea, and obviously if you're charged with rape and you get a simple assault, you're gonna take that deal.
Right.
I think a measure of success is just the ability to come forward and tell your story. Just reporting it goes a long way.
Absolutely.
Because, first, saying out loud is probably one of the hardest things to do. And when you get through that stage of it and you're telling the right person, our role is to believe you and to support you any way that looks.
This question is for Jess Walk. As a criminal investigator, you're taught to question everything and verify everything. Victim Services promotes that community members should start by believing sexual assault victims. Do you find it hard to reconcile your training in this philosophy?
No, obviously, if a victim comes and reports something, we're going to believe the victim. We're going to also have to remain neutral and follow up with the investigation, collect evidence, talk to suspects, talk to people that might have been at the party where the victim was assaulted or whatever the case is. So, but obviously, if someone's making a report, we're going to listen and, take it from there.
One more. What training do you believe has been most beneficial in the area of working with victims of trauma as a police officer? And is your approach different with someone of sexual assault than it would be with a victim of another crime?
I think most of my training is experienced throughout the years. I've been doing this for 19 years. I don't really think that the... What was the last question?
Is your approach different with someone of sexual assault than it would be with victims of another crime? Trauma is trauma, right? But do you treat them differently if it's a sexual assault?
Not so much. If someone's reporting something, we're taking the incident report, we're doing follow-ups, but you have to handle things different. So the way we handle things, like if we have to take them to the hospital to get a rape kit, if we have to send evidence away. So sometimes if you're just taking a regular assault where someone got beat up, you're taking their story, you're interviewing, you do more with the sexual assaults than you would a normal, beat up assault, I guess you want to say, or any other crime.
And your referrals might be different.
Correct, yeah. And
Obviously.
we would reach out, if it was a child, obviously, to Ashley, and Family Services is usually on board from the time we get it till, we hit the hospital, and they're there for the whole process with us.
A question from the audience. Do you have a glossary of terms for all ages that can be used to better communicate matters of sex and relationships?
So I do want to throw this out here. The Pennsylvania Coalition Against Rape has a great resource for children and for parents, and it is slipping my mind right now. If one of you guys can look it up, it is a program for children and for parents to help talk to and educate young children on sex, the healthy sexuality, sex health, what is, normal for ages. The mascot's a heart. I can see it.
And it's interactive.
It is. It's
really
literally
interactive.
based on interactive. It's based on games. It's got programming for the parents to help talk and communicate. The name is slipping me right now. I can see the website. I can see the mascot.
See a bird.
Yes. So it's a cute little heart. I have stickers in my office of them. but it has a great resource. Ashley, anything you would like to add to that?
Yeah, I mean that there's lots of resources out there to start looking. I know like there's even Instagram accounts that review books for kids on body parts, and you know, we can maybe highlight those on our Facebook page coming up. But there's lots of great resources out there. The most important thing is proper body part names from the beginning. We teach our kids all the other names, elbow, knee. It's just one more body part, and just developmentally appropriate, but not making up things, birds and bees and storks bringing babies, and just stay away from that. Oh, there's the answer. Go ahead, Thad.
It's safesecurekids.org. Thank you, guys. Safesecurekids.org has a lot of resources like Ashley was talking about. And like Cheryl said, there's interactive games for children as well. It's really great for like that younger, kindergarten, younger elementary age kids.
And this, sorry, Thad, I might be creating more work for you. But Thad's a walking resource.
Yeah.
Thad can go to daycares, he can come into the schools, and he can do in-person training with these kids where they're getting a face and the ability to ask questions. So if you have children and you're concerned about that, you should go to your daycare and have them hit that up and have Thad come in and do some education.
Healthy relationship training from preschool all the way up to seniors in high school plus.
And, like a lot of us didn't get great conversations with our parents or caregivers surrounding sex. How did we learn about it? What misinformation do we still carry with us?
Oh.
So, like, sometimes it's like, find a resource for yourself. Make sure you, are comfortable. Like, you might know it, right? Because we're adults and we've been through more life experience. But,
sure,
to really learn it yourself, become comfortable with it, because then the more you're comfortable and the more knowledge you feel like you have, the easier it becomes to have that conversation with your child.
Absolutely.
So that's part of it too.
Absolutely.
Ashley, this one's for you. You work with children, but at times you speak with the caregiver. What ways do you help the caregivers with secondary trauma?
So we have referral sources and resources in the community, mental health counselors, therapists that we can refer the caregivers to. We always have at an appointment, we have a pre-meeting and a post-meeting where we check in with the caregiver, talk to them. The advocate talks to the caregiver while the child is being interviewed and provides some of that support and resources. So we have the actual tangible resources, but I like to say, obviously our job at the CAC is to support the child and get the information from the child. But it's just as important for that caregiver to know what's going on and that they walk out of our CAC feeling like they know the next steps. They have some resources in their back pocket. They know what to look for from their child moving forward. They have some tools to help support their child, because I know as a parent myself, if I had to go through that process, I would be confused and what's going on? I don't understand what's going to happen. What's the system like? Right? And we even give them a sheet. I feel like the more knowledge is power, the more information we can provide is better. So they get a cheat sheet with everybody's names. We explain everybody's roles. So just, knowledge, education, talking them through it, seeing what they need. And if they're, notice anything with themselves or their children, we try to support them through that.
Let's throw Cheryl under the bus here. As someone who's been an advocate for almost 2 decades, Cheryl started very young. What phrases do you use most with our survivors who have just been assaulted?
I think there are probably 3 that come to mind. And I think it's something that we as a society have gotten so good at that we forget we have it. And that's trust your gut. There are so many times we've been put in situations where we try to look the other way, or we try to give them the benefit of the doubt. So phrase number 2 is, when somebody tells you who they are, you need to believe them. So if they're telling you that they're not a really nice people or person, you need to believe them. I think it's so important for us to start to recognize that and believe that in ourselves. And one of the other phrases that I always used, and I used it very often when I was doing the counseling, and when I was working with survivors, a sexual assault is probably one of the worst things that could happen to you. It's something that you didn't expect, and it's what we've learned. It's done by someone you know. And what happens after that assault is you instantly go into a mode where you're trying to rectify what just happened to you. And so your head, your brain, and your heart are fighting each other. They're trying to come to grasp with what happened to you. And you start to think things you never thought you would think of. You could be the sweetest person in the world, and now you have 100 ways to kill this person that just did this to me. And so you start to begin to think that you're crazy. When you start thinking you're crazy, you're normal, because your body is trying to adjust to something that just happened to you. And the trauma that your body's going through is making you think and feel ways that you never imagined you could. And I'm telling you, when you start to feel that you are crazy, you are actually normal, because what happened to you was not normal. You did not ask for it to happen to you. It wasn't a choice that you consciously made. So just when you think you're crazy, you're not.
And can I throw something out here as well, Cheryl? If you check out our Facebook page, we actually have a short video on there that goes through some tips on how to actually talk to someone that discloses to you. If someone comes to you and is disclosing that they have been a victim of sexual assault, we actually have a resource there for you to actually see what you should say.
And that would be on the Victim Service Facebook page, Victim Services of Family Services Facebook page.
So Cheryl, if you could only train one thing to judges, police officers, and your advocates on sexual assault awareness, what would it be?
So to me, the one thing that comes to mind isn't something that we can teach people, and that's compassion. We need to have compassion. And again, it just goes to start by believing, and it wasn't the choice. The survivor of the sexual assault did not choose to be sexually assaulted. And they're, looking for some form of restitution or justice. And I think compassion is so important.
Back to Jess. When someone reports a sexual assault, do you believe that the victim's interview is the most important piece of evidence, or do you believe that the scene where it happened is the most important?
I would say the victim's statement is probably the most important. Obviously, we'd look at the scene and investigate and, like I said, do more interviews, collect evidence, but usually the victim's statement, because sometimes there is no evidence. So
Yeah, and you
Definitely.
can file charges based solely on the victim's statement.
But you can't file charges based on evidence just laying there if the victim doesn't come forward.
yeah, if the victim doesn't
Depending,
cooperate, then you don't really, you can't really move forward.
Unless the perpetrator confesses, then maybe.
Yes. Then maybe.
How often
Which
does that
doesn't
happen?
which doesn't happen a lot.
It happens sometimes. But
Sometimes. I mean,
usually
it does
gets
happen
thrown out till you get
sometimes, but most of the time it does not. Usually they say it was consensual.
Ashley, what services in Blair County do you feel are most needed for victims?
So for child victims, I think, the mental health and having mental health providers, particularly for really young children, that's just a tough age, and there's really limited resources for children, like preschool age children who have been victims of abuse. I think, it's like almost like the pre-victim stuff, but I think, quality like pre-K and child care programs in our community would be super beneficial, just because so many of the vulnerabilities, right, that we have in our community for children in particular, the poverty level, drugs, substance abuse, just those children, by having a secure and safe place to be during the day or whenever, is just really important in their development and kind of taking away those neglect things, because for children, right, it's usually multi-factors in one. So sexual assault is typically, right, coupled with other issues. So that's, as far as children go, I think that's, necessary for all victims. The advocacy programs, I think, are really key. And, compassionate law enforcement, and really, like, it's not a service necessarily, but the collaboration between entities and among entities for any case. Any sexual assault case becomes much better outcomes for the victim, the court system, the prosecution, when there's communication, collaboration, talking and helping each other out through the entire investigation and prosecution. So just, collaboration is key no matter what systems are in place or services are in place.
I think we're very fortunate to be here in Blair County. We have a really good collaboration between all the entities. I think that's good for our victims.
Cheryl, we understand while there's no way to protect ourselves 100% of the time, what do you think an advocate can do to help someone reduce their risk of being a victim of sexual assault?
So I knew this question was coming, and I have been bracing myself for it for several days because I totally hate that question. That's one of those questions that probably shouldn't bother me, but it really does. Because what we're doing is we're putting the onus on the survivor to keep themselves safe. And I've seen a variety of things throughout the year, like fingernail polish that changes color if you dip your finger in the drink, and there's a, date rape drug in the drink. But I think for me, I think about this. So why aren't we asking rapists why they don't rape? Like, what can you do to not rape somebody? It really bothers me that we're still living in a society where we're teaching each other that we should keep ourselves safe. That question has always really been a tricky question because there's also the human element. I don't know about you, but I don't go around people and try to determine if they're a rapist or not a rapist, and how am I going to protect myself from this happening? It's the only crime, again, that puts the responsibility squarely on the survivor to keep themselves protected. So I think that question really bothers me. But
And can I step in here just for a second, Cheryl? Jackson Katz, been reading a lot of his work, and one of the things that he talks about is the fact that we look at talking about risk reduction, and risk reduction isn't prevention. That's not preventing rape. If someone has the propensity for violence, if someone wants to rape someone, they're going to. All risk reduction does is transition that to another victim. It takes you from being the victim and puts it onto someone else. That's not prevention. That's just moving, the victimization onto someone else. That's not stopping the crime from happening.
And I think too, Cheryl, like you kind of said a statement, a few questions ago, that's trust your gut.
Yeah.
So really, like, if someone's giving you the heebie-jeebies and you, like, that's your first, like, I don't know what it is about this person, but I just am not completely, then, like, you have no requirement, whether it's a family member, whoever, to engage with them, to be, right, like, anything more than reasonable with them. I mean, you don't even have to go out of your way to be kind to people like that, right? And so it's just that socialization and that, we think like, oh, well, this person is whoever. We have to be kind to them. We have to be nice to them. We have to, whatever, give them the benefit of the doubt, right? Because you're like, trust your gut. Don't give them the benefit of the doubt. You don't have to. You don't. And that's okay. And you need to trust yourself. And that's part of, teaching kids the autonomy to make their own decisions and reinforcing that, particularly I think for women, we're taught at a really young age to like make sure everyone around us is okay and the focus isn't necessarily on you. And, so I think a lot of that socialization and the prevention work, that does becomes important. And while it's like, right, you're not protecting yourself or like it's not victim blaming or shaming or anything, but just that cultural shift of, at what point can I put up my boundaries and stand firm in those boundaries, and be okay with it.
And something else to add, and it's something that, most people, and I hate like the dispelling myths thought, but sexual assault often isn't about, the sexual gratification. It's about holding or, showing that you have power or control over another individual. It's about using sex as a tool to, show that you have power over this individual's life, or that you're holding control over them. I think it's just something that we often don't talk about, and it kind of goes along with that.
Yeah.
Ashley, do you find it difficult to put your prosecutor's mindset and training aside and be neutral in your interviews, or do you believe that former training is an asset in asking the right questions?
Well, I will say that prosecutors are neutral. They are there to follow the Constitution, follow the law, look at evidence and determine whether they have enough evidence to charge and proceed in a case. So I was neutral as a prosecutor and did what I needed to do, and I'm neutral as an interviewer. I think that knowing the elements of a crime, kind of having in the back of my head, does make me a better interviewer as far as getting the appropriate information that I know will substantiate and support whatever charges, right? I'm thinking in my head the elements. So that's helpful in that way. It's also helpful in a sense that I know what little details may seem inconsequential to other people that I'm like, no, this is a really good detail that's going to go really well in front of a jury. So I kind of can maneuver better in interviews. But I don't think, I think it's more of an asset than a detriment. And it's pretty easy to set, that prosecutor mindset to the appropriate level to be able to do an interview and have good results and make a child feel comfortable. And my interviews are still very neutral. I went through training for weeks to be able to do the interview. So I follow my training and do what I need to do.
We have a question from the audience. Do you find it concerning that some religions teach children the male gender has spiritual powers that females do not?
Yes.
Yes. I'm not
all in
aware.
favor. So yeah, no.
Once again, it goes to the power imbalance. Sexual assaults are about, an imbalance of power, someone wanting to hold power over another individual. But that's all I have.
Well, and it's really, we see a decent amount of cases of child abuse where religion, and not even this religion, where it's very blatant that there's spiritual powers that male gender has that female gender don't have, where that power and control within a religion, and that a religion can be used against a child or against a victim, or male or female, or right, adult versus a child. You are a child, you are supposed to submit to this. It's all tied up in there. So I think religion can be used as a manipulation or a grooming tool. If the wrong person is using it in the wrong way, almost anything can turn. So religion is not exempt to that, as we've seen with the Catholic Church, with other churches, and other, cults, and, all different kinds of things. It's kind of like the same playbook in a different setting.
Yeah.
Another question from our audience. What are the ways the community can support survivors and the Victim Services Program?
We need volunteers.
Yeah, volunteers,
Donate
financial
now.
donations, not to sound stupid, but volunteers, financial donations, really do help our program. We're a nonprofit. All of our money comes from the community. What about supporting survivors, Cheryl?
Believe, and then believe some more.
And, watch how you're acting and what you're saying, because what are the, Thad, you probably know, I'm what are the statistics of how many people have been sexually assaulted by, certain ages? It's a pretty high number.
Oh dang, I'm
Isn't
100%.
it 1 in 10 people, or generally?
Around 1 in 10, 1 in 11.
Yeah, it's 1 in 4 girls
And 1 in 6 boys.
Yeah.
before the age of 18.
Yep.
So we're looking at those numbers. So think about your family. Start thinking about the people you're around. Even, when I talk to people and you look in a room and you're like, okay, how many people are in the room? Then you are interacting with survivors, whether you know it or not.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And so just the way you speak and what you speak about, and, there are current events going on or whatever cases in the news and people start talking about it, that survivor is not going to feel safe with you if you're there can you believe that? Oh, these money-digging fools just want, right? And so just checking your biases and being that person in a room, or shutting down that conversation so that survivor, you're not directly supporting them, but you're creating an environment where they can feel safe and comfortable and secure in that environment. Whether it's a family reunion, a classroom, a work environment, you have to really start thinking about what's around you and how you can carry yourself to be a safe place for that person.
And I can tell you from experience, classrooms are full of victims. And, I've worked in schools where we've had people come forward and said that, they've witnessed their sibling murdered in front of them when they were a young child. It was prosecuted, it was dealt with, but that was something that no one in that classroom knew. And it was, surprising that, to everyone there, including the teachers and everything, to understand that there was, someone who was a victim of such a violent crime that watched that happen, was right under their noses. And it was, really eye-opening for them to, make sure they were making as safe of an environment as possible for other students.
And I think, Jess, you could probably answer this question. Is rape the #1 reported crime we have existing in our communities?
No.
No. It's like
Definitely
the
not.
most underreported
Yes.
crime that exists.
Absolutely.
We just want to remind everyone that's watching that all of our services are free. Through
And
Victim
confidential.
Services Program and confidential.
Which means all of my trainings are free.
Thad, do you find it harder to educate on the topic of sexual assault with youth or with adults?
Oh, absolutely, adults.
Why?
Youth, kids, children, teens are so open. They're so honest. They will 100% tell you what is on their mind. They will 100% tell you what they're thinking. And they are open to learning. They're open to new information. Adults, it's a really taboo subject. It's something that they don't want to talk about. Most likely, when they grew up, it was a taboo subject in their family. And it's something that, it's hard for them to talk about and hard for them to visualize, to understand, and to admit it's even happening here. We hear that a lot, that, that doesn't happen here in little old Blair County. It does, it does.
We often hear that victims aren't believed. Do you have any statistics on how very rare it is that a victim is lying about a sexual assault?
Oh, it's very rare. So you're looking anywhere from 2 to at the most 8%. It's closer to that 6 to 2%. It is very, 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 very unlikely that someone is going to false report. They are more likely to not report at all than they are to make a false report. Less than 10% of the time, you're looking at someone making a false claim.
I'm going to open this up to the whole group. What part do you think guilt plays in whether or not someone comes forward? Their own personal guilt.
Yeah.
They probably
Yeah.
blame
Oh,
themselves.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Shame. Shame's the big one.
Yeah.
Carry that shame, and depending on the circumstances, we hear a lot, because we interview from age 3 to 18, so we have teenagers that come in, and a lot of it is them going back, and I'm sure with adults it's the same. It's like, oh, why did I start talking to them? It was me. I was the one who picked up my phone. I was the one who responded on Snapchat. I'm so stupid. I met them there. I don't know. I was drinking. Did I say yes? Did I say no? I'm not sure. I think I was raped. Maybe I wasn't. Was I? I don't know. Right? So it's just all those questions and things, and that blame and that guilt moving forward, and, trying to just process it, and they tend to put it on them. And then if the perpetrator has threatened them, right, that's a whole other level of feeling that way. Or if it's someone they care about, like if it's your dad who's the perpetrator, like how, and you're tearing a family apart, and you're messing with financial, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or it's your husband and they support you and they're, raping you, and you don't know what to do to come forward, and you have kids with that person, and what's that going to do? Just all the fallout from it.
Yeah. And I think another thing also is to look at, like a male victim. They're less likely to come forward.
Yeah.
And then we look at something like the male victim being victimized by, a male perpetrator. There's a lot of shame, a lot of guilt, and then even them questioning their own sexuality. Did this happen to me? And questioning, is it my fault? And questioning themselves.
We have a question from the audience. How can the friends, family, and supporters of survivors help to gently encourage them to come forward without pushing them?
Honestly, I think that's one of the things that's important about having our service. So maybe coming forward could be coming to us because we're confidential. We don't call the police and say, hey, Jess, we got a rape victim here. But if by calling us, we can help, we can bring them in and we can talk to them about their rights as a victim. We can talk to them about what coming forward looks like. We can have discussions about what their role was not in this. So, and starting off by believing them, I I can't say that enough. So maybe sway them or persuade them to come to us, call our hotline, and they'll get an advocate that will talk them through the whole, they can meet us in person or they can call us. But I think just getting them lined up with somebody who can help be their advocate from the very beginning.
So if I think, if I am aware that my friend has been sexually assaulted, I shouldn't call you myself and tell you all about it.
No, you should not. I mean, you could call us just to get a little bit of information, but we don't want your friend's information. We want that to come from your friend.
Also, just to throw this out here, if they don't feel comfortable calling us, our helpline can, it's a text app as well. So if they don't feel comfortable, if they're not safe calling, they can text that helpline number and get an advocate as well.
Well, I think, if you're a friend, family, supporter, and you know that there's something has happened, or you're the person who has been victimized comes to you, sometimes it's just strong being like, I'm here for you. Mm-hmm. I will be here for you. Mm-hmm. No matter what path this goes down, no matter what happens, no matter if you decide to tell or not tell, I believe you. I'm here to support you in whatever way you want or need supported, and just staying like a constant presence for them that you're there. I'm here with you, and I will remain here and be a support for you.
And then just another caveat, we are all mandated reporters, so if you were coming to us with information that it was a child that was victimized, we would have to move forward with that information. Sure. But just to throw that out there as well.
I want to
Full
add
disclosure.
Another piece of small advice I would get is if it's your friend or family member, whatever you do, don't make it about you. It's not about you, it's about them. So sharing the worst thing that ever happened to you with them is probably not the road you want to take either. So to me, the most important thing you can do is just listen and be non-judgmental, right? And just be with them from beginning to end.
So we have some wrap-up questions for the entire group. What would you like people to know about sexual assault in our community?
It happens.
We almost could say that together.
It happens.
But it never happens in like a small town like Tyrone, right?
No.
It does.
It does.
There's like a bubble around Tyrone. It just doesn't.
And that's the misconception.
That's the misconception.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or even like smaller school districts, like we're really safe. We all know each other. And we just, I don't know, like we can't reiterate enough. The victims know their perpetrators. These are not strangers. And so it's very hard to.
Which I think that's why sometimes they don't come forward because they're embarrassed because it's a small town or a small school district.
Right.
So they don't want anybody to know.
Yeah. And when everybody knows you, because it's a small town or a small school district, then word gets around and things happen. So it's very hard to keep it a secret in a community like Blair County. So
we have another question from the audience. How is your agency inclusive to survivors of the LGBTQ community?
We are.
Yeah.
We don't refuse to work with anyone, and we treat each person as an individual. We give them their autonomy. We help provide restoration, try with justice and safety.
Yeah. And I would say that, like, coming to family services, I don't think you could get a more inclusive response in Blair County. Like, everyone that works here is trained, is aware, we're aware that there's different victimizations and that we support you in your experience. And so I think, coming forward and deciding to call the hotline or working with an advocate, I think is a really great decision as far as, I can't think of another group that does more training or is more aware of that community and their struggles than family services here in Blair County.
Our helpline advocate actually has extensive training.
Yeah, and goes out and does presentations.
She's amazing.
Groups herself on, the LGBTQ plus community.
Yeah.
We have one this upcoming Wednesday on sexual assault in the LGBTQ plus community.
Oh, that's right.
12:10 Webinar Wednesdays. Brittany's going to be our guest speaker for our Webinar Wednesdays. And it's also important to know that, we do support all victims. Everyone is welcome. We understand that, those community members can face, different victimizations. but we support them in their experience, and they are the drivers of their own bus, and that's something that's very important. Cheryl, you shared this with me when I first started, is that we aren't we're just passengers on their bus. The advocates are there to assist, to support, to offer assistance, to offer suggestions, but it is up to that individual to determine where that bus goes, how long it takes to get there, and who's along for that bus ride. We can get off at any time. It's up to the victim.
So just for a recap here at the end, if I'm a victim of sexual assault, where can I go for help, and how can I get that help?
So, I mean, there's a variety. Obviously, family services, we've talked about it. There's a hotline. The number locally is 814-944-3585. Like Thad said, it's a hotline. You can talk to someone or you can text someone. Either way, if you're a victim of sexual assault and it happens and you need medical care, UPMC Altoona has trained, sane nurses who are, phenomenal. We hear nothing but good things. We work closely with them. So if you need medical services, don't shy away from UPMC Altoona. I will say they're the only hospital in Blair County that has that specialization to deal, but they work closely with family services. So if you're having like a medical problem or a medical emergency based from a sexual assault, you can go to the hospital, they contact family services advocate, and an advocate will show up at the hospital to help you through it. So, there's different, if you want to talk to the police, by all means call the police, you can call the police department, whatever. Really, like we just said, you're driving your own bus. So there are lots of resources, and, we collaborate, we work together. Victim services or family services hotline is a good start, but wherever you're more comfortable. If you're more comfortable going and talking to a police officer and making a police report, then by all means do that, So there's lots of different ways you can get.
I do have a question though. You talked about the medical exam, and this could be for you or Jess. How important is that medical exam when it comes to, prosecuting or getting someone, the perpetrator?
Tricky question.
Yeah, because sometimes you don't get it. Like sometimes there is the sexual assault and you don't get anything.
Yeah, and
so,
it's a time issue too. So
it takes a long time to get the results back.
And the DNA in the body and we can get really deep into this. I don't know how far we want to go.
So there's a lot of factors involved there.
But if you don't go to the hospital for an evidence collection kit within 72 hours of the assault occurring, the odds of finding evidence is like 0, right? We are not going to find that evidence. And the odds of injury to the body in the genital area is very slim outside of that 72 hours, like non-existent. The tissues in those parts of our bodies heal very quickly. It's like the inside tissue of your mouth. So when you're like chewing something and you bite your mouth, it heals very quickly. Same type of tissue. For children, because children are growing and constantly creating new cells, it heals even faster just because of how quickly their body reacts and responds and heals itself. So that 72 hours is kind of like the golden time frame. But even within that, like the first 24 hours, the rate is a little higher. The first 12 hours, the rate is a little higher. And then you have to take into factors like, did you eat or drink? Did you shower? Did you bathe? Did you go to the bathroom? Right? So all of these things also may increase or decrease the chance of finding DNA. So there's lots of different things that go into it to find it. And then the process from there gets tricky, but it's also being mindful of the victim. As a victim, if you show up at the hospital, the rape exam, the exam kit is very long. It's a long process. It takes hours to complete.
4 to 6.
Right. And everyone kind of thinks like, okay, throw a swab up there, swab it around and call it a day. But it's so much more than that. And it's, just up in the gum line, under every single fingernail. You can't move. No one can leave the room. Everything has to remain as it is. It's much more of a process that, again, if you're going there within that 72 hours, you have just lived through a very traumatic event. And now you're being pointed and prodded and looked at with flashlights and swabs and pointy things and all of this stuff. So it's tricky because you have to be mindful of the victim and what the victim would like and what their wishes are and their comfort and their traumatization. When really, if you have a strong statement from the victim or you do an interview, there are other ways to corroborate that case or that story or move forward with investigation that may not hinge on physical evidence, which very likely you are not going to find, and there is not going to be injury. That does not mean a sexual assault did not happen. It just means we don't have DNA or physical injury.
And Cheryl, like, most of the time I know that, like, the victims usually shower. They
usually
feel
do.
dirty, and most of the time they shower.
It's the first thing they want to do
Yeah,
is they
they
want to
shower.
wash that person off.
And if
of
you're
them.
able to retrieve the clothing they had during their
Yeah.
assault or their underwear, you're lucky. But sometimes they wash that.
those too.
Yeah.
I sort of wanted to tag along with your comment about getting the kit done. If it's something you want to do, or you're not sure you want to do, you're not sure you want to file charges, you're not sure, well, you don't file the charges, the police would be filing the charges. Again, this is somebody you know, this is somebody you might have had a relationship with, familiar or sexual, and you're just not sure. I do recommend going ahead and getting that kit done, because if it's within that window, if you don't get the kit done, we lose all of that evidence. So getting the kit done, they have something now called, you can even have an anonymous kit done, where the kit is held for 2 years, giving you that 2 years to make that decision whether or not to file the charges. But I do want to say I wouldn't suggest waiting the 2 years, because then that other crime scene evidence disappears. You might not have ability to, to get a video. So let's say it happened in an alley that there's a video. 2 years down the road, that video may not exist. So you might not have the corroborating evidence along with the rape kit. But getting the rape kit done, while it can be very invasive and it can be very degrading, it's very important that it does get done at the point in time that you go, only because then we have the evidence and you have some time to make the decision whether or not you want to file charges. And I think that's important. You have the decision whether or not you want those charges filed. It's your decision. I don't know if you want to say anything to that or not.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, it's up to the victim. Like, if they want to drop them, unfortunately, we have to drop them. We can't force them to testify. So.
And I mean, from the prosecutor end, if you are able to get DNA,
Get it.
and that, perpetrator is denying ever having seen you or done anything, I mean, that takes it from a he said, she said to kind of a slam dunk case. So, I mean, there's definitely benefits, and it is a valuable service, and there is a recommendation, like, have it done if you're within that window. But, it is your choice, but it helps. It doesn't hurt if you do get DNA.
And they're free. The kits are not charged. If you're a survivor and you go for a kit, that you do not pay for the kit.
Mm-hmm.
What about for child victims? Does the CAC offer that still?
We offer the follow-up exams or the non-urgent. So if it's within that 72-hour window, the hospital still does the evidence collection part of it.
Mm-hmm.
But we would see any children outside of the 72 hours. We do not do the DNA or evidence collection at the CAC, but we do a forensic, like a full exam with a colposcope. So it's a genital exam, but without any evidence collection.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And we want to remind the folks that this is a victim. There was a crime, and there is a criminal involved here. So what happened to you if you were sexually assaulted was a crime, and the person who perpetrated that crime was a criminal. So that this is legitimate. We spoke a little bit about if your friend is a victim of sexual assault, how we could best support them. Is there anything, the other comments you wanted to make about that?
Believe.
Yeah.
Cheryl's got the T-shirt.
I had the mask. I just don't have it with me tonight.
Yeah, it's just being there. I mean, it's being a good friend, and it's, just supporting. I know the words, right, big mistake. We all have our mistakes. We all, I think, Jess, you said the best training is, just learning as you go and making mistakes. And the biggest thing you don't want to do is say, I know how you feel, because you don't.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you are just there to support them. You may have some idea if you had your own experience, but everyone's a little bit different. Every trauma is a little bit different. Again, it's a lot of that is just introspection. and not judging the actions that your friend may take or not take. And with trauma, we know there are so many different trauma responses. So many different responses. And it may not be what you would choose to do. You may not understand what's going on. Like Cheryl said, like, you're going crazy, but it's normal, right? So you may watch your friend go through who knows what type of emotions, responses. They may fall out of friendship with you. They may do or say things to you, but to try to really remove, right, your ego, your judgment from the situation and just remain steady for that friend.
I think one of my most favorite things I have heard somebody say was, well, she couldn't have been raped. Look, she's out sleeping with all these men. Well, did you think about maybe it's about power and control, and she's taking back her power by choosing who she sleeps with as opposed to somebody taking it from her? I think that's one of those things that, people believe once you've been raped, you never want to have sex again. You don't want to be around men again. That is probably so far from the truth. So I think that's important too. Like when we talk about they're going to behave differently, knowing that could be something that you see. That does not mean that they weren't raped.
Right, and we all have that picture in our head of like, what does a victim look like?
Right.
And especially with child abuse, you see the pictures of like the kid in the corner
Yeah.
with their teddy bear, right? And realizing that like that's not always the case.
Right.
And so many of the juries and the jury trials, you just go and we all have our preconceived notion of what we want the victim to cry on the stand and look so sad, and and it's they might be angry as heck and be like yelling, and then all of a sudden we're like, wait, you're not acting the way that I think a victim should act. So like, are you really a victim, right? Or they might be okay and they might have no emotion and be like detached and disconnected.
They may be medicated.
Right. Yeah. And so it's just taking out that judgment and trying to check your own biases, your own viewpoints, and just leaving them out of it, and being flexible and understanding.
And Ashley, to go off of what you said, there is no perfect victim. There is no person that we see and say, yeah, this is a victim. And something else we want to think about is, males can be victims as well. They can be sexually assaulted by a female. And it's something that, they often will question, well, I had a physical response, but you didn't give consent to that action.
Right.
The sexual assault can still happen, with a male victim and a female perpetrator. Yeah,
particularly, with child abuse cases. We've had a few cases in Blair County here recently with, female teachers or older female having sex with younger males. And, it's time to just dispel that whole thought that like, oh, the cougar, the older woman, like the hot teacher, you go, like you're the man, like, because that's not the full story. And that's not, that's putting, right, again, those culture biases and that myth on these cases, and it's just it's not okay.
It isn't.
From the audience, as people who deal with secondhand trauma on a daily basis, how do you take care of yourselves, and how do you suggest others in your position could take care of themselves?
Jess, I want to know how you guys take care of yourself with secondhand trauma. As a police officer, I couldn't imagine. What do you do? What do you think?
I try not to take it home.
Yeah.
I just try not to. We see horrible things on a daily basis. And I just try not to take it home and ponder about it.
Sure.
I think a lot of it is camaraderie, like having the supports built in around, like all of us at the table already knew each other before coming in. We're all close, like we were joking around, just building those just person relationships and being able to know that like you have other people, because the truth is what we do see and what we do deal with and what we experience on a daily basis, most people are not seeing that. And so I think our sense of reality is skewed a bit, and it's kind of nice to have some commonality, like skewed realities, to be able to talk to people who really, really understand. For me, it's like simple things like, did I eat 3 meals today? Did I get enough sleep last night? Right? Just very basic. I'm not even at like bubble bath level. I'm just like, okay, am I living? Do I have a pulse? No. But it's that camaraderie, just like you said, like trying to leave it at work. That's really difficult at times.
And it is. It is. But you try not to,
Yeah. And so, and then, I know at the CAC, we work with a therapist who comes in and does do some like debriefing work and talking with us and, working with our staff, because it does take a toll and you can start noticing some burnout and things like that. It's always, there's a quote, there's a woman who does training, and she talks about the milk out of the fridge and like how would you react if a gallon of milk fell out of the fridge, and you can gauge like where you are feeling in your job, like on how you'd react to like milk splashing everywhere. And anyone with kids knows like your kid knocks over their drink and you're like, okay, some days you're like, I can't handle, right? Then you're probably like, okay, let's take some time, you know. And some days you're like, that's okay, we'll just clean it up, you know. And then, you know, my favorite is like, you may really worry when you're like, I had to clean anyway, this is great, thanks for spilling. You might be like too far the other, like really like staying
Maybe a
engaged
little
with-
over medicated.
yeah, a little bit over, or like completely detached. Like if you're just standing there, like, and you know you have. But it's a good way to kind of check in. Like I think we're constantly checking in with ourselves to see where we're at.
And it's okay
like-
to understand that it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to understand that, you know, I'm not okay right now. I need to take some time to myself to recenter and to figure out, you know, how to get back to being good.
Audiobooks are my fave. I'm an audiobook queen. That's what I do. Just audio out.
Well, in the interest of self-care, all of these wonderful people have worked all day long, and here they are, and it's 20 after 8. We're going to wrap things up. We want to thank all of the panelists who gave their time this evening, and of course thank Family Services and all the staff who helped make it happen, and the Servello Family Studios for providing the sound and video equipment. Thank you so much. We want to get the word out there that we are having our 4th annual Purple Purse event on May 19th. This is going to be both a live and Zoom event, so you can get on and from your home and bid on the purses, or you can come in person, which is my personal favorite. You can't eat food if you are our food anyhow if you're sitting at home watching us. Tickets are available now. You can contact Family Services and we'll help you get tickets. And also in the future, Over the Edge is in October 9th. Is our event. Look for us coming off the wall at the Curve Stadium. You too can be an edger and come down, rappel off the wall. So watch for more information on that. So thank you, folks, and that's a wrap.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.